Good afternoon. Welcome to the session 5, Science Communication. Me and Dr. Jutta, we will try to moderate the session. First, I would like to introduce the co-chairs. Dr. Jutta, Head of the Scientific Development Program Unit at the European Commission's Joint Research Center. She is an atmospheric physicist by training and obtained her PhD in environmental science at Lancaster University, UK, on the topic of extreme rainfall events. And I would like to mention the unit. The unit contributes to the anticipating future policy demands by leveraging on research gaps, new scientific evidences, and technological advances. And the unit is hosting programs with a strong interdisciplinary and experimental character, including the GRC's Art and Science program.
Thank you very much, Murat. So we moderate this panel session in a duo. So I would like to introduce Murat. He is Acting Director of the External Relations Department at the Turkish State Meteorological Service. And he spent the majority of his career as a forecaster and international advisor since 1990. And he's pursuing a master's degree in the Middle East Studies at Middle East Technical University in Turkey. And I learned yesterday that he also studied the Persian language, which I should have known if I had read the abstract earlier.
We will have a key presentation and then we will have a panel discussions. Now I would like to give the floor to Jutta to present our keynote presenter.
Thank you very much, Murat. Let me first say a few words about the session. So yesterday and this morning also, we heard the importance of communication when we talk about early warning, severe weather, and whether it's on the short term or whether it's on the long term. So whether it's disasters that are happening now or whether it's climate change effects. And Elias yesterday made a very nice point in saying it's not good enough that we make people aware of a forecast. They need to act upon it. So we only reached our goal when people have acted accordingly. And we've had too many events recently where the forecasts were there, they were perfect, but people still died because they did not act according to the situation. They were not pre-warned and they did not take the responsibility themselves also to understand what they need to be done, what they need to do. So there's still many gaps. And communication is something that since I'm in the field, and that's over 20 years, we talk about the importance of communication. So we may need out of the box thinking here. We may need some new ideas how to reach our goal. And I think particularly important, we need to start putting the human into the center of our thinking. What makes people motivate? And I think we have a really interesting panel here, very interdisciplinary as well. And so we are looking very much forward to the presentation of Helen now and then the later panel discussion. So our first keynote presenter is Helen. Helen Roberts. She is a socio-meteorologist at the UK Met Office. And she is, now I need to see what I was supposed to say. So she's the UK's first socio-meteorologist working in the intersection of the social and physical science in order to ensure that weather forecasts and warnings help people make better decisions to stay safe and to thrive. And we're very much looking forward to your presentation now, Helen.
So over the next 15-20 minutes, I'll talk, well, I've sort of covered my background there. I'll explain why I think social science is so important in our sector and at the Met Office. I'll talk a little bit about what my role of socio-meteorologist entails and how that fits into our weather and climate extremes and impacts team. And then we'll go on to talk about some specifics of how social and behavioural science research and insights can help us improve our products and services. So I've kind of gone through this already, but just to reiterate that I did my master's in psychology a couple of years ago, and my dissertation was on post-traumatic stress disorder resulting from natural disasters. So that's one way in which the intersection of psychology and meteorology is of interest. And as I mentioned, I'm just starting this PhD looking at the decision processes involved in our national severe weather warnings. I also just wanted to mention actually that there is a little bit of audience participation later on. Don't worry, it's not too onerous, but if you happen to have your notepad and pen, do get that ready. If not, don't worry, we can do it without. So why do I think social science is so important? Well, at the Met Office and of course in the world of meteorology in general, we have this wealth of expertise and knowledge in the natural, physical, and more recently in the data sciences. But there is this growing recognition that social science is equally as important. And I really love this quote from Phaedra Dafer, who wrote a book called Masters of Uncertainty, that when forecasting the weather, we're actually predicting the social consequences of the atmosphere. So what is sociometeorology all about? Well, hopefully the job title is fairly self-explanatory. The socio part is all about people and society. Of course, I don't need to explain what a meteorologist is to this group of people, but it really is that intersection between the social and the physical sciences. So my journey so far has been all about collaboration, networking, understanding what research exists in this space already. So internal collaboration within the Met Office has been really important. And to that end, I set up a community of practice, a social science community of practice at the Met Office a few years ago. And it's been really successful. It's a place where people with any interest in the social sciences can get together, we can share knowledge. We have monthly get-togethers which tend to alternate between presentation sessions and more informal coffee chats and discussion sessions. We have an online community where people can share knowledge between those monthly get-togethers, and we invite external speakers and guests as well. And then, of course, external collaboration is equally, if not more important. And given that I'm the only sociometeorologist at the Met Office at the moment, although I hope that will change and will expand the profession in the coming years, external collaboration has been absolutely vital. These are just some of the many partners, collaborators, and network community members that we have at the moment. So I'm a leadership fellow at a group called Access, which is advancing capacity for climate and environment social science. And environmental social science is a really blossoming sector at the moment, certainly in the UK. And this is a transdisciplinary group of people from academia, from government bodies, and from the private sector and charities as well. We have an official social science collaboration at the Met Office with the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, and then plenty of much more informal collaborations globally as well, including with the Centre for Climate Change and Social Transformation, which is a group of academics across Bath, Cardiff and Bristol universities, which is called CAST. And of course, given that I'm here with you today and yesterday, I'm hoping and already have expanded this network through WMO contacts as well. And then I just wanted to show this slide, which is a collection of some of the media outreach and engagement that I've been involved with just this year, just to really highlight how much interest there is in this topic at the moment of sociometeorology and extreme weather and how that links to climate. So I've been involved with multiple podcasts. I've spoken at a number of conferences globally. I have a few papers in review at the moment, and we've had the national print media, interested in the role as well. And then I work much of my time with this team, Weather and Climate Extremes and Impacts team. We're fairly new. We were formed in autumn of last year. Our purpose is empowering people to deal with extreme weather and remain safe and resilient in our changing world. And I really like this bit about empowering people to deal with extreme weather and help people to make better decisions. And our team was set up in response to a few notable events that happened in the UK and in fact globally in recent years, not least some flash flooding resulting from convective rainfall in London in 2021, and the unprecedented heat in which we exceeded 40 Celsius for the first time in the UK in summer 2022. And that word unprecedented is really important because when something has not been experienced before, we need to make extra efforts to ensure that people make the right decisions, because it is something by definition that people have no prior experience of. So this is the interactive bit. So if you do have your pen and paper to hand, then what I would like you to do, and you can do this at home as well, if you don't have pen and paper, then just use your finger on the desk in front of you. And I would like you, please, to just simply draw a cloud. And can you, if you've done that, hold them up so I can have a look? Excellent, yeah. Brilliant. I'm seeing lots of lovely cumulus clouds. I think there was a towering cumulus at the back there somewhere. Cumulonimbus, lovely. Yeah, excellent. So why am I asking you this? Well, I have been running a series of little games and mini experiments through the course of the summer with a variety of different audiences, including Met Office colleagues and the general public at the British Science Festival. What I did was I split people into two groups. Now, you here today were the group who didn't have access to this graphic in front of you when I asked you to draw a cloud. Some of my participants did. And my hypothesis was that those who had this image of different cloud types in front of them would draw a wider variety of clouds on that request. And those without this would mostly draw what's readily available, what comes to mind easily, which is the nice little puffy cumulus cloud. And thank you, you supported my hypothesis. Most of you did draw a nice little puffy cumulus. And what this is all about is different cognitive biases that we have. And it's important to be aware of these cognitive biases because they impact the way in which we receive and respond to information, including weather forecasts and warnings. So this particular bias that we're testing here is called availability bias. So as humans, we're quite cognitively lazy. We like to take shortcuts, heuristics, rules of thumb, if we possibly can. And this is brilliant because if we had to agonize over every single decision that we made, we would probably be overwhelmed or perhaps paralyzed. We wouldn't make any decisions at all. If you think about how many decisions you've already made today, what to have for breakfast, what to wear, what time should I get up, all these small decisions that we don't really think about potentially involve quite a lot of cognitive load. So we have these rules of thumb and shortcuts to help us, and they're great. But sometimes they can lead us astray. Sometimes these cognitive biases can lead us to make the wrong decision. So we have to be aware of them. So I'm going to move on. There were 3 experiments that I've been running during the course of the summer. I won't labour them too much, but just have a little go at this one. I'm afraid, hypothetically, congratulations, you've won a holiday. You're off today, you're at the airport, and you have the choice of these 2 locations. So the images that you see, the pictures that you see are taken today. So this is the weather that you will get on arrival at your holiday of choice, and then you've got the 5-day forecast below. So all I want you to do is choose which holiday, and perhaps for the people who are online, you could comment in the chat about which holiday you would choose. I'll give you a few seconds to make your decision. Okay. Hands up in the room if you went for holiday A. Okay, probably about 2/3 holiday B. Much, much fewer. Okay, interesting. So my initial hypothesis here was because of what's called, what's this one? Present bias, hyperbolic discounting. This is whereby we treat our current selves much better than we treat our future selves. We often give our future selves today's problems. It might be why I definitely had too many of those gorgeous little cakes that were available yesterday, because my current self wanted them. They were yummy, despite the fact that my future self would probably regret that decision. We do this all the time. And it's relevant in terms of weather, and it's very strongly related to procrastination. So, for example, if you live in a flood-prone area or a location that's prone to strong winds, you might know that you should take some preventative action, but give that problem to your future self. So my hypothesis with this one was that most people would choose holiday B because it looks so lovely, and this is what my current self will get. But actually, the room here today and the data that I've collected during the summer, I was proven very much wrong with this one. The vast majority chose holiday A. And what was interesting was when I asked people why, the variety of factors that went into people's decisions, people really agonized over this choice and really thought long and hard about it. And to be honest, it wasn't the best way of testing this particular bias. It was really difficult to come up with a weather-themed test for this particular present bias, but interesting nonetheless. And then the final one is that there's heavy rain in the forecast and a severe weather warning is being considered. So in scenario A, there's a 60% likelihood of this type of localized impact. So we've got some surface water flooding on the road. And the question is, what colour warning, if any, would you expect? And then scenario B, exactly the same instructions. In this situation, we've got some property flooding. And then in scenario B, again, 60% likelihood. And this time we've got vehicles being swept down streets. And all I want people to do is suggest whether it would be a yellow, amber or red warning. And this is the matrix that we use at the UK Met Office to issue our warnings. Now, the majority of people, I'm not going to ask you here today, but just have a think about what colour warning you might go for if you were asked this question. And this is about a bias called severity bias, and it's quite specific to meteorology. And this is whereby we tend to conflate or confuse severity with likelihood. However, using the matrix that's on the screen here, we already take into account both the impact and the likelihood when we issue warnings. So all of our warnings will be somewhere on this matrix. And so the correct answer, if you like, is because it was a 60% likelihood, we're in that second row down where you can actually see most of the dots, which was one of the groups that was doing this test for me. So we're probably either no warning and amber for A, B and C, or perhaps yellow, amber, but we're definitely not issuing a red with a 60% likelihood. But there is this misunderstanding, which is not surprising because we don't actually actively communicate this warnings matrix to the general public. We use it for the emergency responder community, but the general public don't usually see this matrix. They can find it if they sort of know to look for it. You can click through from the warning notification and see where on the matrix the warning is, but you have to know to look for it. What that means in reality is that a yellow warning, for example, could be a low likelihood high impact warning or a high likelihood low impact warning, but they will appear exactly the same. And this is a problem because you would likely want to take quite different action in response to those two different types of yellow warning. And one of the ways in which we're addressing this issue at the Met Office is we are imminently going to be issuing advisory action statements alongside our warnings. So yesterday we had a really great discussion. Ilyas asked Vasiliki about action-based forecasts, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we had a behavioural insights organisation help us with this piece of work. It was a fantastic piece of work that took multiple years, but we, as a result, have a list of action statements that are clear, simple and easy to understand depending on the warning type and the hazard involved. So the reason that I wanted to talk to you about these cognitive biases, and you'll see here that there is a list scrolling on the screen of actually, in this case, 106 different cognitive biases. I had to look in the literature to see if there's a definitive number, and it's somewhere between about 150 and 170 in total. So these are just a few of those biases, but it's important, as I said, that we are aware of them in order that we can tailor our communications to take account of these biases that people have. And I've picked out a few here some of which I've mentioned in the experiments that are particularly relevant to weather forecasts and warnings. A particularly important one here actually is Hick's law, where more options lead to harder decisions. So this means that when we are issuing our advisory action statements, that they must be few and clear and easy to understand. And banner blindness, where people tune out to information they're repeatedly exposed to. So, of course, this is the danger of overwarning. So we can take all of this behavioural and psychological research and literature and use it to help us with our communication techniques. And here are just a few of the ways in which we can take account of this research. For example, it's usually preferable to show rather than tell. So pictures are so much more impactful than words. And in fact, using imagery like the Weather Channel with this augmented reality can really show the dangers and the hazards associated with particular weather. And in this instance, it's showing storm surge. It's also important that we humanise rather than sensationalise. We've had multiple discussions about this during the last couple of days, whereby particularly in the UK, in the unprecedented heat of last summer, the tabloid media in particular was showing very positive images of people on the beach, eating ice cream, children playing in fountains. And actually, it really impacted our ability to warn of the dangers of the heat. So showing the uncomfortable reality of the situation is much more preferable. Think about the what and the why of the message. So rather than saying to people, don't travel unless necessary, explain that. So it would be much better to say something like using public transport during a heat wave puts you at risk of being stuck on a hot, broken down train. Think about the time and the location of the warning. So again, in a heat event where we're suggesting people don't use the oven for cooking, locate that message in the supermarket where people are making decisions about what to have for dinner. And then think about the framing of the message. It's usually preferable to frame it in a positive rather than a negative way. So rather than don't travel to work, say work from home if you can, just reframe it. And then, of course, as I've already mentioned, make sure that the advice is specific and actionable. So rather than keep an eye on vulnerable people, explain that it's good to ensure your elderly relatives drink at least 2 litres of water per day. And this is just a few key points from a fantastic systematic literature review by Ripberger et al. 2022 that I've been recommending to anyone and everyone who's interested in the topic of communication of probabilistic information. People intuitively infer uncertainty even when we give them a deterministic forecast, and most people can make sense of and use probabilistic information. In fact, people make better decisions and have more trust in information when it's probabilistic as opposed to deterministic. So no longer can we as meteorologists and scientists make sweeping judgmental statements like, oh, the public don't understand probabilities, because that just isn't the case. And there is plenty of literature to prove that point, as long as, of course, we do it in the right way. So it's important that we make sure the probabilistic forecasts are straightforward and easy to understand, and of course that we don't overwhelm people with too much information. And before I wrap up, I just briefly wanted to talk about the psychology of climate communication. It's a really fascinating area, not necessarily my particular area of expertise, but I thought it was important just to briefly cover this. And the way in which emotions can be used in a really beneficial way to encourage behaviour change in order to encourage people to make more sustainable choices. I expect many of you have heard of the term eco-anxiety and related terms like solastalgia, land trauma, ecological grief. These are psychological impacts of our changing climate. And as I mentioned, the way in which we use emotions can make our communications both effective and affective. So there was a fantastic paper that came out just about a month ago, and there's a great write-up of this paper in The Guardian, which suggests that anger is the most powerful emotion for spurring climate action. So I'd encourage you to look up this paper because, yes, it suggests that anger is an effective emotion for encouraging climate activism, which arguably is one of the ways in which we can help to mitigate climate change. But when you read the paper, there are some nuances within it. So the most effective emotions to encourage policy support, for example, are fear and guilt. And the most effective emotions for individual behaviour change are sadness, fear, and hope. Now, I must caveat this with the fact that this was just one paper with 2,000 participants in Norway, so may not be representative of the global population, but it's interesting nonetheless, and I think it's a topic that deserves more attention. And it got me thinking about what motivates me as an individual to make behaviour change to try and minimise my own carbon footprint. And there are two images which have really stuck in my own mind that I've seen in recent years, and some of you will have seen these yourself. So the image on the left is penguin chicks in Antarctica freezing to death because it's raining there, which is very unusual. It's usually snow. And this was some footage in a David Attenborough documentary, and it really stuck with me, and it's an image that I think of a lot when I'm trying to minimise my impact on the environment. And then there's this still taken from video footage that you can find online of an orangutan trying to defend its home from loggers. And I think both of these images probably evoke for me a sadness and perhaps a guilt as well, and really help to motivate me. But I also wonder, and I haven't seen much, if anything, in the literature about the emotion of awe, but I was thinking about it. Certainly astronauts go to space and look back on the Earth and very often make comments like, I saw all of humanity out of the window, the pale blue dot that Carl Sagan made really famous. This emotion of us all being in it together and that we have to look after our planet. So I wonder if this could be an effective emotion, or does it rely on us actually leaving our planet in order to get that perspective of our own Earth? So I just wanted to leave you with a question really about perhaps the ethics and our responsibility as meteorologists and scientists of using emotions in the way we communicate. Is this our job as scientists? Some may argue it's not, and that we're here just to present the data, and some may argue that it definitely is our role and that we should be doing more of this. So perhaps a discussion for later in the day. So in summary, I think the social sciences are as important as the physical and data sciences. And my mission is really to raise awareness of the importance and coordinate the great work that's already going on in this space. And I think the social sciences and psychology are especially relevant for high impact and unprecedented events. So thank you very much for your time today. Here are my contact details. Please do feel free to reach out if I've sparked any thoughts or discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, for a fantastic presentation. And I think it really was the right keynote to open up for a lot of reflection. Is there any question in the audience? One, two, let's take these two, and then we have one online also.
Okay. Thank you, Helen. We're having a short online intervention about the ethics of climate change communication. One thing that struck me, and certainly I know this from my own life, my wife is a social scientist as well, when you talk about the different ways of communicating risk and communicating hazards, it's very difficult, surely, to actually test the hypothesis of whether communication strategy A works better than B because of the ethics of exposing people to floods or extreme climate events. So how can we be sure that these strategies which you outlined are the most effective ones if we can't ethically test them?
Thanks, John. Lovely question. Yes, that's certainly some big ethical issues. One of the ways in which I'm hoping to test, for example, those advisory action statements that I mentioned on our national severe weather warnings is via surveys that thankfully we have a long history of conducting after each amber and red warning that we issue. So a selection of the general public are asked first of all, did they see the warning? Were they aware of it? And then more importantly than that, of course, as we've discussed multiple times, what decisions did they make and what behavioural response did they have as a result of those warnings? So we have data going back to 2011 when our warnings changed from threshold to impact based. And we will be continuing with that work after we make this change imminently. So thankfully we have that longitudinal data, which is very handy. And in addition to your question about the ethics and how we might conduct this research, there is of course the ongoing challenge that we have in terms of asking people what they would hypothetically do in a scenario does not always match with what they would actually do in reality. So we need to think of clever ways of finding out.
Okay, we have one more question here. If you can keep the questions and answers short in view of time, and then we have one online question.
Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation, Ellen. Forecasts and warnings have a sort of mathematical wording which may affect the sociology of the community. Is it suggested a change in the wording or better the training of the public to accept that wording? Thank you.
Thank you. I think probably both of those things. So yes, there will likely be an element of public education, particularly as we move away from deterministic to probabilistic forecasts. However, it is very much our responsibility, as I spoke about, to ensure that we communicate in a way that's easily understood by the vast majority of people. And just to briefly mention, the literature suggests that in terms of the numerical representation, that a straightforward percentage number is the most easily understood by the majority of people. But of course we can and should use graphics and other ways of communicating to make sure, because there isn't a one size fits all.
Good statement, Philip.
In the game we played, I was wondering, why did you use different images? Because on the second option, which was a rather gloomy prospect, but it had a better beach. I'd rather be on a nice beach undercover than on a dirty beach with beautiful weather. If you saw the first image, was a very ugly and dirty beach. I wouldn't go there anyway.
It was really hard to find matching images of the same place in different weather. It was really hard.
I think it was the weather forecast that got most people to rather spend the rest of the holiday in nice weather. This was good. I have one question here online, but it's a rather general question that I ask it anyway, but it's something we could also open up towards the end of the session. This is, how do we see the position of the worker or the person in the operational meteorology field in 15 to 20 years? And how far should knowledge in the field of meteorology go? It's a general question, but it's a good one because we focus it on communication. Yes. Big question with a potentially very lengthy answer, but let me try and answer succinctly. I think from my perspective, which hopefully represents the views of the Met Office in general, is that we are trying to diversify our meteorologists in terms of their background, their expertise and their skills.
communication is a vital part of a meteorologist's tool belt, if you like. So no longer is it necessary that all of our meteorologists are, world experts in the physics and maths and dynamics of the atmosphere. Some, yes, but not all. And we will have others who are experts in communication, experts in customer support. And I think the role of the meteorologist in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time is much more about translation of data, decision support, and consultancy, rather than purely forecasting the weather.
Thank you very much, Helen, for excellent presentation, and thank you very much for the very good questions. Now we are starting our panel discussions. We have 5 panelists, including Helen, and we have a special contributor, online contributor from Italy. We will ask the guiding questions to the panelists, and they have 4, maximum 5 minutes for each questions. Now let us to introduce you, our panelists.
Okay, so our first panelist is Tanja Segner. She's from the Slovenian Environmental Agency, and she is chairing the European Meteorological Society Media and Communication team and is organizing communication session at the annual EMS meetings. I'm not going through all of this in view of time, but she can share with us a lot of information and a lot of experience on the subject. The second panelist is Milan Kalash. He graduated as a civil engineer with a PhD degree in hydrology and water management, and he is, since 2003, a core member of developing the European and global flood awareness systems at the Joint Research Center. But he's here in his capacity as CEO of a private company, a consultancy company that he developed over time, and he will talk about his experience of EU projects, particularly Anywhere and Anycare, where he's going to present examples.
Our third panelist is Dr. Mariana De Brito. She is group leader at the Humboldt Center for Environmental Research. She is a geographer in training, and she is focusing on hydroclimatic extremes and socioeconomic vulnerabilities. And our fourth panelist is Mrs. Corina Negra, is a producer and anchor with Radio Romania. She holds a chemistry degree from Bucharest University. Currently, she hosts Science 360, 60 minutes live science radio magazine on weekdays on Radio Romania. And she serves as the Nobel correspondent since 1998. Covering Nobel Week in Stockholm, Sweden, and since 2008 in Oslo, Norway, for both news and cultural aspects. And we have a special contributor, panelist from Italy, Professor Alberto Pirni, is professor in moral philosophy and climate ethics at the Institute of Law, Politics and Development of Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies in Pisa, Italy. He is the coordinator of research area on ethics and global challenge. He is also coordinator of the seasonal school on the ethics of climate change. And we have photographer artists after the panel discussion. We can also mention them. Mr. Razvan Stefan Boternau, Mr. Sergiu Pavel, Mrs. Irina Alexandru, and Mr. George Alexandru. And now we can start our panel discussion. Corina, I want to start with you. As a journalist, what is your take on Helen's presentation? What do you think? How does the interaction between the message, the way it is communicated, and the audience affect the success of communicating about weather, water, and climate?
Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me here, and thank you and well done inviting a journalist to speak at this conference, because it's very important indeed to communicate. I think it was an excellent presentation, and I think what Helen is doing is a great job, because it's very visual, it's very entertaining. I'm so, how to say, I regret that I cannot use this kind of communication because it's visual, I'm radio, so I use words. One of the messages I want to send is that I really think it's very important to to talk more and more about hard sciences, like we say, in connection with soft sciences, meaning I don't know, meteorology, chemistry, physics, and so on, but with humanities, because it's very important for the message, the hard science messages, to reach people. And you cannot reach people without trying to understand how they think, how they get the messages, how they behave, why they behave in this way. So that's why I think that especially in this field of environment, climate change, meteorology, soft sciences, humanities can play a very, very important role. You have to place these sciences in the social, economical, political context. And I'm saying this because I've noticed that when we covered Turkey earthquake, of course, we spoke about earthquakes. Yes, what was the specificity of this event? What is in Turkey, about the geology? But we also spoke about construction, about the impact on medical services. So we put this event in the context of a daily life thing. And this is, again, this is the way the messages are reaching people better than communicating very, very, correct and up-to-date scientific discoveries or achievements, but without this emotion that other things are coming with.
Thank you very much, Corina. And now I would like to ask to Tanya. Tanya, one of the most important message from Helen's presentation is there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to effective communication. It is important to tailor communication to the audiences or provide multiple options, versions. As the chair of the media and communication team of the European Meteorological Society, can you tell us the European Meteorological Society approach to designing and implementing communication strategies? How do good communication strategies lead to actionable advice that concretely contribute to better handling emergencies and crisis preparedness, particularly when it comes to weather-related incidents and the effect of climate change?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for this introduction. I'm happy to be here on behalf of the European Meteorological Society Media and Communication Committee. I'm with the European Meteorological Society from the very beginning, and I must say that at the beginning it was very difficult to convince the colleagues that also communication has a place at the scientific conference. So it took me a couple of years really to struggle with them, and now I'm very glad that our conference, which is attended by 600 to 850 people each year, mainly scientists, but it is also open for free for journalists. So journalists receive a waiver for the registration fee. That's one of our achievements. And now we have our place there, and each time we are able to increase our inventory of examples of good practice. We are a group of enthusiasts, I would say, who are doing things that we are not able to do at our everyday job. More or less, we are all involved in a kind of communication. Some of us are chairing, let's say, a group or leading a group of meteorologists presenting weather at the TV channel. Some of us are, let's say, chief editors of scientific journals or editors of scientific portals or bulletins, or some of us are authors of scientific books on communication of science to general public. So we have expertise, we have a lot of experience in communication. Each year we organize a media and communication session and science communication, including communication of uncertainty. And I must say that our sessions are very well attended. A lot of people, even if they do not present, even if they are not actively involved in communication, they just come to listen because we have a variety of presenters addressing a lot of different topics, sharing their experience from their country. Let's say, to give you an example, we have people who are sharing with us how they developed their service for general public, from the co-design, testing the first drafts, and then how to implement that and what is the feedback from people, how they test that. We also invited some artists to share with us. We also have a photo contest within the EMS. We also invited climate skeptics to discuss with them how we communicate climate change, what is wrong, what works. We also organize each year a workshop. At the beginning, we started with training workshops because we wanted to train our colleagues how to perform in the media, to explain them the peculiarities of each of the media, because it is different if you go on the TV, it is different if you go on the radio for the interview, how you build a relationship with the journalists, because that is also very important. If you have something very important and you have a number of journalists and you can call a journalist, please, can you put this in the media? We really need that. So that is very important for us. So we started with this training. We also organized workshops on how we communicate climate change at the beginning, because some years ago there was not much experience in that. We also trained our colleagues how to go for a job interview, how to present yourself in a couple of minutes, or how you present yourself if you have only 2 minutes or 1 minute. We explained them that maybe if you give an interview, you will be there only for 20 seconds on the screen, or maybe 10 seconds, and how you need to condense your main message. For the media, you cannot go there and talk for half an hour or 1 hour. Well, you can, but you will not be there. It will not be used. So those were those training workshops. We also are involved with WMO, ECM, WF, and UMETSAT in organization of communication workshops for national hydrometeorological communication people, where we share our experience, we learn from others, we also brainstorming. This year we dedicated a lot of time to artificial intelligence, and I would also like to highlight that each year we present 3 media awards, one for the journalists, one for outreach and communication projects. Those are usually big projects like conferences, like blogs or something like that. One communicating weather and climate award for individuals that are really involved in the media for many years, those people who really live for, let's say, media, and to share their knowledge with the general public and also the scientific community. We also organize next year a very focused workshop, a symposium on human biometeorology and outreach, inviting different stakeholders, because we want to build a network of stakeholders, share experience and knowledge, ways to communicate effectively these services, identify knowledge gaps, data gaps, because that is also very important, and also pick up on new trends, because the science is evolving constantly, and this workshop will be held in Barcelona. I would just like to say that last year we had a workshop in Bonn, and it was dedicated to agrometeorology, how to communicate effectively these services. And Elena was one of the presenters there. We had that privilege. Thank you, Elena. And we also come out with some recommendations. We published this. So we try to really share what we have, what is our knowledge and experience with the broad community. Of course, we are also giving place to the national Met societies to share what they are doing to reach out to general public, but also to specific users. So that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tanya.
Thank you very much. And I think Milan can relate to quite a few things that you said about teaching people about communication, and that there has been an involvement, and it's great that you can get journalists into your sessions. Milan, we would like you to respond a little bit to the same question, and I know you will have difficulties in focusing because there's so many things that can be said, but how do you see, because I think in the services that you worked with and with the Horizon project, not really communicating to the public, but communicating to the responders, to the civil protection directly. So from your point of view, how do we get information across that is actionable and that is useful? And let's try to stick to 4 to 5 minutes.
I must say you make it extremely challenging now, especially after Helen's presentation. I would go like, all my notes so far, I made another 4 pages of notes. I will probably say something completely different. But to be fast and focused, like what I believe from the perspective of European projects, what I think is extremely important is that they provide a chance to bring the people together and communicate. This is what I see. If you have all the different stakeholders, scientists, meteorologists, operational services, civil protection, but the communities as well, and they start talking, it's a very eye-opening experience, and this is what we faced. I was really lucky for the projects where we had this experience. And like the practical translation, I would just mention a few examples, and it was also related to John's question, how we can test things. Like, for example, Catalans, we help them to shape the social media campaign, because like the effective communication is not something you set up in 3 days and during the disaster you'll just launch it and it will work. So it is a very continuous process, and I think like building a continuous campaign using social media is something where you can effectively measure what is the response to the messages you are posting. And during the peacetime, all the slow activities where you explain what is the best behavior, how to self-protect, how to self-prepare if something is coming. This is very important. And the continuous presence that people are used to. There is used to a channel which is speaking to you what you should be doing. And during the disaster, you relate, okay, I heard something from that channel. So you go back and you ask for the official information. I think this is very important. And it gives you feedback because you can change in the peacetime the ways how you communicate, and you also can measure, quantify how people respond to it. I think this is very important. And like, I would stop here, not to take too much time, but I can talk for hours. Like, happily leave it for later.
Thank you very much, Milan. And I think that leads me immediately to Mariana. Mariana, so what Milan was saying is the beauty of project is to bring the different stakeholders together, from academia, researchers to the responders. And yesterday, Professor Skalin was making the point is that everything is speeding up thanks to the developments of AI. So, and that's your expertise. So how do you see that coming? What is the innovative role that AI and natural language processing, which is one of your last papers, can play in detecting and responding to natural disasters in the social media, and how can this be used in a better way to the public?
Thank you for the question. So I think there's actually many opportunities and avenues for using AI and deep learning techniques. And one of them actually responds to the question that was made before, because in Helen's presentation, she showed that, the survey in Norway with only 2,000 people. And with AI, we don't have to limit ourselves to surveys. We have a lot of text information in forms of social media reports, weather reports, and from worldwide, and we can use this to understand which kind of how the discourse was framed, which tone was used. We can actually measure how things were formulated, which kind of sentiment the text was transmitted, and what worked and what didn't work. So let's say you take two pair events, so two floods, similar conditions, but one of them, let's say, things worked out, and the other one is, let's say, Germany 2021, where things did not work out. And you can try to see if there are patterns in the communication Other ways that AI can help us is to understand the impacts of these events. And of course, I'm biased because this is my my focus. But we can detect localized events, so small using newspapers, especially localized newspaper, not national ones. You can see small, I don't know, bridges that were broken, or for droughts, you can identify livestock that is being killed. And this kind of things. Also, there is potential of using, I don't know if you're aware of Google Trends. They use a lot for diseases. So when people are searching for, I don't know, my nose is running, this kind of things, and I use this for early warning, because they can, if many people are searching, it looks like, yeah, it's going to be some outbreak of the disease. And we can do this for other events. It has been shown already for droughts. We can see how, if people are searching, I don't know, I don't have water for irrigation, this kind of things. So the government can adapt towards that. So in short, there are many ways. Just a last example. I have seen now there, with the generative AI, there's a lot of advances in chatbots. I have not seen this yet for disasters, but I could imagine there could be like an application where people also use it. How do I respond? How do I prepare? What are directions to shelters? This kind of things. But of course, there are many constraints that also need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Now I want to ask a question to Helen, and I will give the floor to Milan after Helen, almost the same question. From the Met Office point of view, what is the difference between the fast, weather, and the slow onset, climate disasters in terms of communication? And do they need different communication strategies to result in preventive actions? How can effective science communication enhance the understanding and adoption of early warning systems and climate change adaptation strategies within communities?
So this morning, Andre talked about this in terms of acute versus chronic, which I really liked that framing. And Milan, you talked about using peacetime to educate and inform people and get the message out so that people are ready in times of that acute or fast reaction, which is also very useful. I also wanted to flip that around to think about using the acute situations to talk about climate change as well, which has been demonstrated to be effective, again, with the caveat that it's done in an appropriate and useful way. So I guess what I mean by this is probably after rather than before or during an extreme weather event, but in the immediate aftermath, while it's still fresh in people's minds, we use that opportunity to talk about how this is related to climate change. And actually, we at the Met Office, and I'm sure many people in this room, are finding that when there is an extreme weather event, one of the first questions that we're asked by the public and by media and by customers is, was this due to climate change? So the science of attribution is really important, and we can use those extreme weather events. But I'll hand over to you, Milan, to talk more about that.
And Milan,
It's
can
not
you
even
answer
necessary,
the question
because I
from
will
the
just follow up.
disaster risk point of view, mainly fast onset disasters?
I will ignore it and I go freestyle now because I just want to respond to Helen. Because like exactly this is what we are trying to do in one of our follow-up projects. It's called iChange, and we look at what are the behavioral changes towards low carbon society, how we can spark people to behave climate friendly. And this is exactly the narrative we are introducing, that we use the extreme events to educate about climate change and how you can change your behavior to make, well, to explain, okay, at your personal level, what you can do to face less extreme events. So we are connecting, like we are using the same tools to collect information about landslides, extreme precipitation events, but citizen science exercise, you're using local sensors or mobile applications. But at the same time, we are trying to introduce people like, okay, if you measure now 30 degrees in Italy, so it's something really extreme. how does it relate to climate? You know, how many times in the past this temperature was observed, and how it will change with the changing climate? We will face it much more frequently. What are the consequences? What are the mitigation measures at the personal level? And at the same time, we are communicating how you should behave if you are in the acute situation. And this is what we are trying to use in the wartime to pass the message more, effectively to the people. And we are really trying to engage the communities. Like, for example, in Germany, we are working a lot. We are launching surveys to understand how people reacted, where they see the gaps. And what we realize that people, well, at the moment, the society is set up in a way that they are passive recipients of our warnings, but they are willing to participate in the process of being warned and actively receiving information and learning how to best react. And I think this is always, we have like a window of opportunity for 3 months after the event where we can do it. And we are also trying to use like shared experience. I don't need to experience the event by myself, but I can learn from looking at the others. And I think this is also quite an important element we have to work with.
Milan, and I think that's an excellent bridge between the now disaster that has just happened and may have been a fast onset disaster to the longer term, because it's very difficult, it seems, and I think this is one of the issues of the climate community, how to communicate the urgency of a slow onset disaster. It's a disaster nevertheless, but it will not happen immediately. I think that's what you mentioned also with your, now I want the cake, even if maybe tomorrow I think differently, but this is what am I happening now? Tanya, your reflection on what was just said with focus on the climate and the slow onset. So how do you deal with that in EMS?
Well, we have a lot of presentations on how we communicate climate change and how to motivate people. One of the things that came out at the last conference was that many times we just see these catastrophic titles in the media, and some people are just depressed, and they think that they just stop to act. So what we should, or how we should communicate climate change, is to motivate people to act and to give them the opportunities and also the possibilities how to act, how to contribute, maybe only with a little piece of change, and not just overwhelm them with that catastrophic news and depress them really, because yes, of course, we have to play with emotions, but we need to be extremely careful how we use emotions in our communication. We also addressed and analyzed the early IPCC reports, and we found out that at the early stage of the IPCC activity, the reports were not really written in a way to reach out to decision makers and to politicians. We also teach our colleagues that if you have to prepare material for a decision maker or a politician, you have to write down half a page, not in any case, not more than 1 page, because otherwise they will not read it. It is useless if you produce 100 pages of a report, very well done, excellent science, but they will not read it. They will ignore it. So it is also very important how we pick out the information that is conveyed to the decision makers, because we need to pick out the information that they perceive as useful for them. Otherwise, they are not going to use it. That's the reality.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tanya. And you know that I'm working at the Joint Research Center, and we are at the interface between science and policy. And we have dedicated courses that you could find on the EU Academy on how to communicate science to policymakers. So there are special training courses on which language to use, on the length of the text, and it is sad, but I fully agree with you, if it's more than 2 paragraphs, it's probably not read at all. Mariana, coming back to you as a scientist and in this big field of communicating science or finding a way of science to policymakers, the public, the civil protection, the responders, where do you see the gaps in science, particularly now on AI, and how would you find your way in science to make it useful?
Hi, yeah, thanks for the question. So as I mentioned previously, we can now with AI we can measure communication, so we can see how it's done. But there are several challenges. One of them is the language. Most of the models, they are trained for English language. It works for some, like German. I have experienced it works well, but Portuguese, the models are not so well developed. So we definitely need more testing in that regard. But regarding the potential, advances that could be achieved through AI, I think one of them is early warning impact-based early warning. So there is a movement in science to move not only to identify where hazards are occurring, where a flood is going to occur, but which kind of impact will happen. And as was mentioned yesterday, one of the areas where we have uncertainty is some impacts, for example, culture or mental distress, which are hard to quantify. And I think by using natural language processing, we can try to tackle this more hard to quantify impacts. And this can feed then models for early warning, impact-based early warning. And also, as I mentioned too, also analyze previous events and what went wrong. We can analyze not only like written text, but let's say you have speeches, we have a speech recognition, and then see which kind of patterns of language encourage or disencourage people in taking appropriate adaptive measures. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. And I want to ask a question to Corina again. Corina, in what ways can collaboration and knowledge exchange between researchers, policymakers, and communicators further bridge the gap between scientific insights and the practical implementation of climate adaptation?
Well, in the way it is now, but much more improved. I mean, in the sense that between the scientists and the policymakers and the public are the communicators. Let's not focus only on journalists, but well, mainly media, yes. But today we have a lot of communicators of science in different shapes, yes. The social networks are a very good environment to communicate, to send messages. On the other hand, it's a place where you can find the worst information. So they have both sides of the stories. The dialogue between journalists and policymakers and scientists should be continued. And I think that, following a little bit what Tanya was saying, I think that the communication with the policymakers should be more or less the same way like you communicate to the general public, because not always the policymakers are specialists in the field, yes, in the climate change, let's say so. Or maybe they are, but they have to be, how to say, you have to address the problem in, let's say, more direct terms. If we don't do this, the results will be this. And I also think that media plays a very important role, because again, media can translate all these messages. Like it or not, sensational will be always looked for media, yes. Emotions, sensational titles will always sell the newspaper, to say so. We have to use this, if we can, in a better way than in the worst way. But I think that we should, how to say, strengthen the communication between journalists, scientists. I personally feel the need to be, how to say, to learn more about how organizations are working, how the institutes are working. We do this in the radio. Yes, we try to explain to people what are those scientists doing, why are they doing what are they doing, and so on. I think here it's how to say, in a way it's a teamwork. Yes, we have to make a team with all these actors. We cannot, neither of the parts can do the job alone. And I think that we have to be very, very aware that people are having access today to the information more than 10 years ago. Yes, the access is more rapid. Again, the information is not always the best that they can get. So we have to come, you, the scientists, the policymakers, have to come out and address the right message. But you have to, the policymakers should take into account that today there is a tendency of questioning the authorities and the authority. So this is I think, a very sensitive point. We have to be very careful.
Thank you, Corina. That's a really good point, and I think that links well to Helen, who's in a Met office working. But you mentioned something yesterday. Can I just come back to that? But yesterday, when we had our little preparation round, you said for you it's much more difficult now to communicate science than it was 10 years ago. Can you just say one or two sentences why you said that? Because I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, in the sense that, like I said, now the listeners have access more rapidly to any kind of information. Yes, they move fast. They can check the information. We have to double check, of course, the information. We cannot just sell like this. On the other hand, we have to deal with, and I've noticed this during the COVID period, we have to deal with this tendency of not trusting the scientists, not trusting the medical doctors, not trusting the authorities. So our effort to bring all these supervised opinions and checked opinion is double, tripled than 10 years ago. When people didn't have Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, a lot of people are now checking only social networks. They don't follow radio, they don't follow television so much like before, 10 years ago. That's why I think that, on the other hand, specialized journalism is very much needed, because you have to understand, first of all, the problem you are talking about, and then to address.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that's why the initiative of EMS to bring journalists into conferences is extremely important. Helen, I come back to you now, because what she said was really relevant for the Met Office also. How do you perceive that? Are people trusting the Met Office versus social media? And what do you think the role of AI that you also alluded to, and games and all the things that you're doing, is this to gain back the trust of the public? Or is it just one tool to communicate? Or is it also going beyond that?
So in terms of trust of the Met Office, it's something we track and have done for many years. And it was interesting to see how that changed or not. Going back to Corina's point about the COVID pandemic, what the data show, interestingly, and I make no personal comment on this, but the facts of the situation are that the pandemic in the UK led to a decrease in trust of politicians, but an increase in trust of scientists. And at the Met Office, we kept our trust scores very high throughout. But we can't take that for granted, and we need to make sure that that continues to be the case. And a worrying trend we've seen of late, actually, is that perhaps a few years ago, especially on social media, the criticism that we received as an organisation was generally from climate deniers. And I think we've got to the point now where you can't really be a climate denier anymore. There is the evidence is so overwhelming that that is not a feasible argument. So that skeptical community have switched that argument and are now attacking the integrity of organisations like the Met Office and the data that we're providing. And a couple of examples of that we've seen recently are that we were accused of overhyping the temperatures in our broadcast graphics. In particular, the colour scale that we used. People were saying, you're scaremongering, you're using dark reds and purples and blacks on your colour scale. We've never seen that before. You must be doing this on purpose. Well, the reason people had never seen it before is because it had never happened before. That scale has been the same. It's just that it's unprecedented. And then another way in which our data are being attacked and questioned is, for example, there was an accusation that we'd switched from using air temperature measured at the standard height of 1.5 meters to ground surface temperature, and that's why it had looked hotter than it should have done. And again, obviously this is absolutely not the case. I don't know where that accusation originated, but it just goes to show the way in which the arguments and the discourse have shifted over recent years. And then just very briefly to go on to your question about how we use games, it's really interesting. I showed in my presentation augmented reality graphics, which I think can be very, very powerful. We've also used a game to research the public's response to probabilistic information. We used Brad, the ice cream seller, a few years ago in a really interesting piece of research. And the key finding of that was that people do make better decisions using probabilistic information. And then a third way in which we're using gamification at the moment in the Met Office is to test whether people make better decisions using climate projections in industry by gamifying the data rather than presenting it in what might arguably be a much drier, less engaging way. But I'm going to again hand over the mic to you.
Well, yes, you don't need to even ask. Well, we have quite some history of developing games, and the whole story with the game started in one of the projects in Anywhere. We didn't manage to explain our project partners what is the advantage of having impact-based forecast. So we designed, like in the fake country, in the fictitious countries, in a fictitious environment, we took carefully selected meteorological, hydrological events. We put it into scenario situation that, okay, this is the city and they're organizing a party and they have different events. And we took professionals involved in a disaster risk management in different countries. We brought them into the room and we made them play different roles they are typically used to. So there was a meteorologist and he was handling for the schools. Somebody was responsible for transport, and we completely mixed them up. And we made it in a sequence of days, and every day they were receiving pieces of information. And one day they received spaghetti plots, and in a very short time they had to make a decision and discuss among each other. Like the school guy, should we close the school or not? I cannot tell you, I don't know. And they suddenly realized how difficult it is to be in the other side of the table and receive the information which is not optimized for immediate action. And this is how we tested again in a kind of controlled environment, how effectively we can communicate and what kind of things we can do with the same piece of information, just to talk to different people and just hit effectively the target. And it was really interesting experience. And we expanded, like we did a gamble that during the Finnish semester, they organized a big event inviting ministries of interior of all EU countries, and they played the game. So such a big forum. We said, like, okay, either it goes very well, or it will be a disaster. And it went amazing. These people were really super excited. It was really eye-opening. And now, like going back to slow onset climate change, we typically realize that people say, I couldn't imagine something like this happening in my town. The second thing, like we are missing the local knowledge. Because, okay, we can deliver a perfect forecast, but if we have the same forecast or same event happening 10 times in the real environment, it will result in different impacts. Because there are local things which are changing, alternating the flows. And this is what we are trying to bring into the game. So the games is like a tabletop exercise where you can build your own environment. while building it, you start realizing what are the particularities, what are the hazards, what is the interaction, if they can cascade, coincide. And typically we encourage people like work intergenerations. Like I was playing with my parents the game, and they were bringing up the old pictures like, you don't remember, but we used to kayak in the city to go shopping because it was flooding. And we were working with the pictures and we were drawing it on the map. And it was really interesting to pass the knowledge, like you create a memory, living memory of the place, and we can share it. And also like what we did, you have like, depending on how you behave, the scenarios of extremity of reoccurrence of extreme events is changing. If you are using car every day to do your daily move, you are facing more frequently the air quality issues. You have more frequently, if you're passing a river, you cannot pass because there is a flooding. So it has the kind of connections to real life. And again, it is a nice way of people exchanging and educating. Like you can do mitigation measures and you have a card, and on the other side, you have explanation, why is it important, what does it mean? And what is also a nice feature of this game is that it can be co-designed. So we have like a plan where you have empty cards and people they can create their own actions. Like I can do this to mitigate in my hometown. So it's really a very creative way and really engaging to educate people and to share the knowledge. And talking about augmented reality, like when we say like, I've never seen something like this happening. We recently started working with virtual and augmented reality. And the first exercise we did, we took the Slovak flood maps and we flooded Bratislava. Like you have a slide there and you say, okay, what happens if you have 20 centimeters in this square? And you can show people how their daily routine life would change facing 20 centimeters water in their environment. And this is what we try to use on one hand, like, okay, to imagine what will be the situation, but also like for trainings, it's very useful. We now talk to emergency managers like, okay, this would be a really nice exercise to train our emergency procedures. And we can, like we had a discussion yesterday about unprecedented event, things we don't have real experience with. And this is one of the ways how we can really stress test our emergency procedures for something which never happened. So I think for the future, this is very interesting topic to keep on exploiting, and it will definitely have something to teach us.
Thank you very much, Milan. And I really wish we would have time to exercise this game in this meeting, but maybe for the next time, I hope. And now I want to ask the last question to Mariana, and then I will give the floor to Professor Alberto. Mariana, what is missing for a scientist to bridge the gap to administration and policymaking?
Thanks for the question. I think what I'm going to answer is not specific to this field we're discussing today, but science in general. So we tend to be project-based. However, like long-term communication requires long-term engagement. So there are different time scales here. A second problem, I work in the Department of Urban and Environmental Sociology, and we work in very close collaboration with hydrologists and natural scientists. And they develop their models, and then sometimes they come to us and they want us to communicate, but that's also not how it works. It has to be done from the beginning and in a co-design process that was mentioned by Milan before. So we have some very positive experiences where we had like a it was called like cooperation, so equal partnership with us and the policymakers and also modelers from the government, where they develop their models, we develop our models, and we are in close communication from the beginning of the project, not towards the end. So maybe this is a way of bridging this gap. Yeah, and in just a final thought, I'm an early career scientist, and I must say there's not much incentive for us scientists to engage so much into a transfer of knowledge. Because a promotion for us is basically mainly, what's our Asian Index common communication. So, but this is, another topic. Yeah, thank you. Can I just add one more
about this thing? So, you, the scientists, the specialists, have to keep in mind that if you don't go out and communicate your knowledges, your expertise, that your place will be, how to say, replaced by people who are not specialists, who are not, who are only there for spreading things, not even information. So we cannot, how to say, get rid of deniers, climate change deniers, or vaccine deniers, or whatever kind of deniers. And what we have to do, I think, is to put the correct information to just balance or counterbalance these deniers, how to say, activity. But without you, the scientists, being out there speaking for the public, it's useless. You will be replaced. I know it's a hard work. Like Tanya said, a doctor journalist, make connections with journalists, explain them, don't ask them to send your message because you want this way, but to send your message because this is the message. Give them the opportunity to check, to understand, and then you will get to the point. Thank you.
And before I hand back to Murat, I have one comment to what you said. I think it's extremely important. We saw today a presentation of the link between the administration and academia, where I think it's important that, for example, PhD students or bachelor students can come to the organizations like the Met offices and have a special topic that they can do their work on. But it's also, I think, really sad from the scientific community that there are no incentives for young academics to actually link up to policymaking and to impactful research. And I think there the scientific community really need to step up to find other incentives than just the number of publications. That we heard yesterday, every 12 hours, our human knowledge doubles, which is very scary because it means that there is no more knowledge because there's just so much that everything is drowned. And I think the scientific community needs to work on that. And I hand over to you. Sorry, I needed to say that.
Thank you very much, Jutta. And after the contribution of Professor Alberto Pirni, we will receive a couple of questions from the audience. Alberto, I think you are online. We have listened to the presentation of Helen and listened to the panel members. Many times they refer to behaviors, ethics, emotions, and everything that was said points to the importance of awareness and understanding of at all levels. That is for each citizen, but also scientists and administrations. You have developed specific training courses to this end. Please, can you share your program with us? You have 5 minutes and you can share your screen. Thank you.
Thanks indeed. Thanks for having invited me and thanks for having me. Let me just double check if you can hear me appropriately. Yes, you can. Yes. Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm going to share a very quick presentation, hoping that you can see it now. And in the meantime, before I start, let me express a special thank to Dr. Cornelia Radix, to Dr. Jutta Thielen del Pozo, to Murat Altinyollar, and to Dr. Natalia Berghi for having done this possible. Well, now I launched also the presentation in full screen mode, hoping that you can see it. Now I can't see you anymore, therefore please just tell me if it's fine. Sorry also for not being in presence. Would be more relevant to be there. But what I would like to share with you is the following. We do have a kind of need of complementing the entire amount of questions and the entire area of questionings that the colleagues raised in so wonderful but also so tremendously relevant ways, as I heard this morning, by trying to address the idea and the challenge related to ethics of communication on climate change and how we can try to manage this. Before entering or in order to have a more accurate picture of what is the challenge or what we have to do, we have to be aware about the fact that we don't have a unique challenge. Rather, our challenge is completely multifaceted, as multifaceted and irreducibly multifaceted is the target commitment. So we have to educate politicians, scientists, at least politicians, scientists, operators, journalists, trainers, students, the general public or the public sphere, as has been already mentioned. The intercontextual, but also the intergenerational communication has to be put at the center of this picture. Let's imagine how to communicate between systems, meteor systems. This is one of your main challenge, of course, but let's also stick on the challenge devoted to train the trainers. So we have to educate a new generations of trainers devoted to, again, address this entire amount of people, amount of possible targets. Well, to limit my intervention at the very two points, I would love just to say what universities can do. Of course, I don't have time for passing through the entire amount of things that we did, and a lot of other colleagues involved in these fields done in recent years. We just started more than 20 years ago for doing something that I'm used to call bringing the university outside the walls of the same university. So the Higher Education School of Philosophy and Public Ethics, this was my first task in the 1998, but the grounding of the Interinstitutional Center, Research Center on Climate Ethics and on Climate Change. Let me mention also the first national PhD school that we have in Italy on sustainable development and climate change. Now you see the number by yourself on this screen. We are gathering more than 52 universities. Let's imagine that the Italian universitarian system gathers around 70 up to 80 universities. Therefore, we are by bridging private and public universities. Therefore, we are pretty representative, I would say, and we are hosting more than 380 scholars in our program. And then also the launch of more specific programs, as this one that you can see on the last bullet point. So the seasonal school, the ethics of climate change, reshaping responsibilities for present and future generations. But this is just a preliminary point for saying some numbers. And these were some numbers in the background. These are some numbers in perspective, and this is the point I would love to focus on for just one remaining minute. Three numbers: 1, 2, 3. One consortium. We decided with some colleagues, starting from the Region 6 Training Center, plus L'Aquila University, plus La Sapienza University in Rome, plus we all as Sant'Anna School of Advanced Studies, to start reasoning, to start launching a common discourse devoted to this need and this lack of specific education on communicating climate change. Then we decided to be more specific, so to take seriously into account what I showed to you in the first slide, meaning the fact that we have to differentiate the target, starting from a macro area differentiation, meaning the two basic regions that we would love to address, opening, of course, the floor to any other region that might be interested in this field and in this path. So a proposal for an higher education course for WMO Region 6 and a differentiated proposal from an higher education course for WMO Region 1. And then the last number, three content units to be developed. Let me just mention these as a kind of bullet point. Well, we know that we are fully, let's say, entered in the early warning for all era, let's say. Now, which are the grounding values that are surrounding, supporting, and promoting, and why not, enforcing this idea and this program in the very nearest future? This is an issue that should be shared, that should be clarified, perhaps that should be deepened, and we will love to be in charge for doing that during those two courses. This will be the first pillar for both courses that are differentiated in a way that I can now show you more in details. The second point is about advanced decision-making process. Well, communicating is one thing, but also communicating for doing. So not communicating for listening, but communicating for acting in accordance. So the things will be how to educate to the moral dilemmas, modalities for reacting towards emergency situation, very strong challenge, or very strong, very fast and furious, we might imagine, events that should be addressed. Moral dilemmas theory will be at stake, but also by combining theories with action research, so with practice and with case studies analysis. Last but not least, the ethics of communication. Again, there is a huge debate about communication, about how to better communicate using different instruments. Colleagues before mentioning virtual, also virtual means or virtual tools and whatever. Things might be, and the story might be more than long. But again, the idea is how to tackle, how to address problem-solving training, how to train the trainers. So, meaning people able to train new generations of communicators, but also people that are really embedded and engaged in doing the most crucial and the most delicate work. Politicians, operators, scientists, person at work during emergency case, during early warning situations. We are going to present more in detail these part and also other opportunities together with other colleagues, a lot of other colleagues in Italy, and not only in Italy, of course, during the next COP28, which will take place in Dubai on the 9th of December as per our event. 3:30 local time in the Italian, based in the Italian pavilion in the Blue Zone. This was my preliminary and minimal approach to this, but and let me thank you for your attention. But I heard a lot of very stimulating keywords, like Murat, you mentioned the intergenerational approach. I'm working in intergenerational justice. Tanya mentioned motivation. This is another issue for a moral philosopher that is completely at the center of our picture, meaning there is a lot of things to do. Let's hope that we will be able to do this in a strongly and a conscious, transdisciplinary and cross-border perspective. Thanks again for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alberto. If I can participate to the COP28, I will visit your side event, and I will be very happy to receive detailed information about your training programs. Now I think we have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Yes. Do you have any question?
Hello. Yeah. I don't specific question for any one of you, but maybe if somebody would like to answer. I think also that this situation with extremes are super background for the conspiracy theories, because we see when we have this high impact event, many conspiracy theories pop up, many of them related to the weather modification or things like that. So is there any advice how to relate to that, or how to approach the general public communicating about these conspiracy theories and not the event itself? Because in one moment journalists start to ask you, okay, what about the chemtrails? What about the HARP? What about other things? How you communicate that with the journalist and not with the public?
Maybe we start with Tanya.
Well, we have a lot of these conspiracy theories, and sometimes they are very, almost very aggressive towards us. Sometimes you just don't want to go and read all the comments you get under your post. But I'm usually saying to the journalists when they ask us, well, we put on all our media, on our website, on our social media, the explanation of the event, because we feel that we need to reach out. And I always say to the journalists, yes, sometimes when people feel hopeless or affected by one severe event, we had devastating floods in August. So there is that anger that comes out, and if they are not able to explain it rationally, what happened, they just reach out to some of the theories that for those people sometimes it is rational. And the problem I see is also the social media, because people are trapped in their bubble of information, and they just get information of people who have the same perception of the reality. And they are reinforced each time they go there on the social media because they live in that bubble. And the only thing maybe is that we break that bubble somehow, but it is extremely difficult. What we really need to do is to work with the journalists and to spread the real and concise information in a way that people hopefully will understand what happened.
Yeah, and maybe also Helen can say something. Maybe next time we have a round like that, we have to invite people from the Commission on the AI Act, because I think exactly how we deal with social media, with AI, with these kind of novel tools, there is a lot of policy behind. And if there's any policy that allows us to break the echo chambers, to get people out. And also what you said before, the responsibility of each individual to not let the void being filled by those full of hate. But I hand over to Helen.
I was interested, Tanya, that you said earlier that you've invited climate deniers to come and visit. And I'm keen to hear more about that, maybe after the session, because at the Met Office we made a decision a few years ago to largely not engage with conspiracy theorists and the climate denial community, particularly on social media, online, largely because it's a battle that we felt we couldn't win and was taking up a lot of time and effort. Therefore, we can use that effort more effectively to focus on perhaps the people who are undecided, the people who are receiving misinformation, but not necessarily aware that it's misinformation. And we're actually just creating an online hub at the Met Office at the moment to address those sorts of communities and challenges. We also have a facility on formerly Twitter, now X, which is a sort of myth-busting tool whereby if there's something that's gaining popularity in the public discourse, we can address that directly and explain the truth behind the myth. That's some of the ways in which we're trying to address that.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, you cannot avoid, you cannot eliminate the deniers, the anti-vaccine, the conspiracy groups. You cannot. They will always be there. They will always find another argument, in their opinion, to answer to your argument. I have tried during the COVID pandemic, I have tried to interview, because I went to a demonstration. They were protesting against the vaccination law that we don't have, but they were protesting against the vaccination law. And I interviewed people from there, and I asked them, okay, did you vaccinate when you were young? They were my age, so we all got vaccines here during the communist times. Of course we got the vaccines. So you are healthy and you are okay. Why are you against vaccination? Because they want to put chips, and sometimes microchips. Sometimes you really question yourself, these guys are really serious in what are they saying? So these are their convictions. You cannot change their convictions. Again, I have tried to interview them. So I put on my Facebook page an announcement that who is interested to give interviews for the science radio program with arguments. Why are you not, why don't you want to vaccinate? Just give the arguments. I have only one person who gave an interview, like Helen said, he was undecided. He was not against, he was undecided. He said, okay, I believe in vaccines, I vaccinated myself, I don't want to vaccinate now with this new vaccine, which is fair enough. Yes, he was just thinking. But again, you cannot stop this. You have only to put good information to counterbalance. There is no, how to say, there is no rational dialogue in these situations because you don't have the arguments to give them to change their convictions, unfortunately. I don't know how we can do it.
Yeah. May I, like maybe one very practical comment. We, in the projects again, we have been engaged with a group of digital volunteers. It's probably one of the biggest volunteer organizations in Europe, and they are very successful in combating the misinformation on social media. They have really strategies how to amplify the official channels, official information, how they do this blog myth busting, and they're really effective in it. It's, I don't know, the latest numbers I remember like 12,000 people digitally present, and they are helping, they're working with the official authorities, with civil protection, med offices in different countries to help them to spread the right information and amplify and a little bit moderate the communication on social media.
I would like just to make it more concise. So this is the scenario. For example, in UK, you have like a Daily Mail publishing article about chemtrails. Let's say it. Does the Met Office will send some kind of note to the Daily Mail and telling them, okay, this is not true, don't publish this anymore, or you will ignore it, like in case of climate deniers, let's say?
We have invited Daily Mail journalists actually to visit the Met Office, and it was really interesting because the particular journalist who visited was fantastic and really passionate about weather. And what we often find is that when you read the article, is actually okay. It's the headline that's normally the really bad sensationalist part. So that's one aspect of that situation. If it in your specific context, if it referenced the Met Office, we would respond, and if appropriate, we would ask that to be taken down or corrected. If it didn't mention us, I would expect that we would probably leave it be.
Yeah, just a very short comment. I think it regarding the spread of conspiracy theories, there is also the role of the companies, right? Like X and Facebook, whatever. So I saw recently, I think Instagram now, because of the Palestine conflict, that it flagged that this is like this is not real, this is a conspiration theory, and then you have to click 3 times and then it shows you the information. So maybe more regulation.
If you ask them to take down the article, it might be seen like an interference. So you don't do this. You just come out with your professional, scientifically based point of view, which is not helping always, but this is, I think this is what you have to do.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. It's a very interesting discussion, and thank you, Vladimir, for pointing this out. And then it will be 2 hours of discussion, please. But just to say quickly, hydro-met services are perceived as the government, and that's the source of the problem. Because in many countries, at the end of the day, after a certain number of years, they found out that one government was corrupt. Another one. Many years ago, European Commission was replaced completely. So can you imagine, if we are perceived as a government, that's the source of the problem. We should actually open our doors of the hydro-met and show people how do we do the business. What is the behind science? What is why do we observe it the whole planet? What do we do? And when people notice, they will not relate us with chemtrails or whatever conspiracy theory. So I think this pointing to the basic work of the science behind hydro-mets is the key aspect that people will stop, and actually they will start to like these hydro-mets because they do a fantastic job for 150 years plus, etc. I think that would be something that would try to show.
This is exactly what I was putting in my presentation, but like Milan, I gave up with the presentation. This is something I really think you should do. Open the doors for the public to come and see, if possible. It's not always possible, but as often as it's possible, do it. Open your doors for journalists. Invite journalists to stay with you. I told my panel colleagues my experience with one institute in Germany in 1997, an ACOS fellowship, European Initiative Communicators for Science. We were put in a lab, 7 days. We were paired with a scientist. I did PCR for the first time. I'm used with lab because I graduated chemistry and physics, but I had colleagues from other countries who were, I don't know, philosophers, yes, turned to science communicators. And it was it was a brilliant experience for them to see how a lab is working. What is a lab? What are the scientists doing? So I think that if you are bringing journalists to your labs, to your institutions, to tell them how you work, to see you daily, in your daily work. Okay, there are some people who are not agreeing with this, but I think from my perspective, this is something that works. Okay.
Okay, so we have 2 more questions, one over there.
Well, this
Philippe
is
first.
something I've struggled with for some time. It may not happen in this part of the world, but in Africa, if you have a press conference, or in a few places in Africa, if you have a press conference, and you invite the media expect you to pay for them to come. In those cases, what is the balance of ethics and transparency? If I am having to pay somebody to report on something, can the communication be objective? In other words, what is the relationship between funding and objective communication? Because they will claim they don't have means of covering the event you're promoting. And so, how does it go?
Yes, thanks. I'm sorry, I was not able to follow entirely the discussion because the volume is not so good from this side. But thanks indeed, Jutta. I will love to say some words on that. First, let me also follow up the last intervention. Well, I had the opportunity to speak with Nobel laureate Parisi, one of our Italian Nobel, one of the most recently Nobel laureate in physics, Parisi. No? And I told him, well, Professor Parisi, we are waiting for final words and definitive words coming from science. Why is not happening? Why there are scientists that are trying to say something different, that are running along another path? Well, we launched a pretty interesting, intriguing, at least to me, discussion with him. But I do really think that it's time, as the colleague was saying at the very end of her intervention, it's time for creating a new form of allegiance. This is time for relaunching a strong and in-depth discourse between hard sciences and social sciences, saying that, well, first we have to always ask the sources, always ask for the footnotes of what you are saying, or what you, the Danielists in turn, let's say, might say this time. And this is not just for chatting, but is trying to ground our argumentative path. Second, ask, and this goes to the direction of the Jutta, and also the last intervention from the public, from the audience was raised. And second is about the ethics of communication. Well, let's try to be fair and transparent, meaning if I have good arguments, then I have good chance to be listened to. But if I am not so strong, I have to admit at the end of the conversation that I was wrong. Full stop. We are not used to do this with Daniel idealists, which are used to say, okay, let's think what you want. I remain on my own opinion. This is exactly the false situation that we have to avoid. So try to admit to the discussion just the only speakers that are able to say, yes, I was wrong, I'm sorry. Otherwise, we are continuing in a kind of unfinished path without any kind of view of solution. And my last word, Murat, please consider that the nihilist party are really brilliant in communicating. are more brilliant than the scientists. So please try to invest also resources on this issue. Not just, well, I would say on equipments or meteor stations, but also on these kind of situations. Otherwise, we are carrying the risk or being not, let's say, prompt, not ready to struggle, to combat, to be in front of this super brilliant and super effective communication as the Denialist Party is embracing.
Thank you, Alberto. And we have another question from the meeting room, please.
Thank you very much. It's
But
me again.
please keep very short because we...
Yes, it's not a question. It's only a remark because regarding to everything as it was said here, I should only highlight the idea of the necessity of fighting more for education for climate. It's very important because we cannot coerce anybody to believe anything. It's true, there is only one single scientific truth, and all we have to do is to educate the people, the public, and everybody around us on the truthful of this scientific truth. And as Professor Pirni said, we must train the trainers. So I should call for everybody, all factors concerned, organizations, educational institutes, decision-taking factors, and so on, to unite in a big movement, public movement, to promote education for climate. And we all know that the European Commission has a section and a very sound policy direction towards education for climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we close the discussion part of our session, and now we have artists, and I give the floor to Jutta to introduce the artists.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you very much also to all the panelists that we have here. I just say thank you now in case we forget at the end. It's been really interesting, and I think the engagement also after lunch and people digesting, I think, shows that they are interested in the subject, and there's a lot to do. Now, why did we invite artists? Well, at the JRC, we started years ago a program on art and science, because we believe that we need out-of-the-box solutions to make science more effective and to bring different disciplines in and to become truly interdisciplinary. That means also working with philosophers, with the public, with humanities, and with artists, to stimulate different way of thinking right from the beginning of a research question. Because when you engage with them, they may come up with a question that you think, oh, I did not really think about like that. And this is really taking track now. And I think particularly after COVID, you realize that the importance of culture. And we also realize that sometimes there are things that we cannot convey in writing. We said before, someone said images give you more, show you more than any report, but also a tangible object may explain to you a complexity. And I think that's what we're dealing with, particularly climate. It's an extremely complex process. My action locally can have an impact globally. Global impact can influence me locally. How do we make all of that understand? And artists are really, really good in teasing that out. And so let's work across the board, intergenerational, interdisciplinary, to make things happen. So we're very happy today that we have also here artists, and we have a photographer, and you see around you the really beautiful photographies. And they're not only beautiful because they capture lightning, which is extremely difficult. Everybody who tried it, I'm very intrigued at how you managed to get them. But they also show you the power of nature. That's for me, when I saw your photographs and the power that you see, how insignificant we can be against these huge clouds and forces. I think this is really captured really well. And I think we can use these means to communicate also to people. Let's be careful with our environment. So I'm now inviting, so it's a panel of 4. We have George Alexandru, who's the Vice President and the Association of the HIU Photographers. We have Irina Alexandru, who's the President also of the Association of the HIU Photographers. Mr. Razvan Stefan Butaranau, I probably mispronounced terribly, I apologize, from Community of Storms, Romania. and Sergiu Pavel of the Association Severe Weather Alert. He's the president there. One of you will give a presentation, a combined presentation. One or two of you will give a combined presentation. And after that, we go into the coffee break for more discussion. And please then view these beautiful photographs.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow meteorology enthusiasts, good afternoon after all. It is an honor to stand before you today and also have the opportunity to share our passion for meteorology and Romania's extreme weather phenomena. What has drawn me and my colleagues to this conference and continues to motivate us every day is that unique feeling when you are face to face with a storm, because we certainly had the privilege of experiencing and learning from the front lines about the power and beauty of nature. So, in fact, who are we? We are RoMeteo, aspiring to be the agora for meteorological enthusiasts, born out of the passion and desire to spark the interest of the wider public in the severe manifestations of weather. The main purpose of this entity is to encourage and reward their research efforts, including from a visual perspective. Why we? Well, this entity came into being through the collaboration of 4 communities. Photographi Hai Hui. You know, here and there, photographers, an association that, in addition to carrying out numerous acts of charity for impoverished communities, organizes the most extensive and efficient storm chases. Furtuni România. You could consider it as Romania Storms, a community with an impressive growth, boasting over 42,000 weather-passionate members. Severe Weather Alert Sălaj, a non-profit organization that can pride itself on a network of over 27 private stations in the Northwestern Territory, aiding in weather monitoring and evolution throughout the whole county. And the last, but definitely not the least, Meteo Nord-Est, an entity that has undertaken the role of explaining the synoptic elements underlying weather phenomena to the general public, and also proudly possessing a Blitzortung type detection station. Now, the piece that completes the machinery in storm chasing and explaining storms can be the art in the form of photography. In this context, photography transcends its traditional role as mere visual documentation. It becomes a bridge between science and aesthetics, and could serve also as both an archive of meteorological phenomena and a canvas for human emotion. That's why this gallery here and outside these doors, art and science converge, inviting us to contemplate the intricate interplay of elements. But beyond their aesthetic allure, these photos also carry a message, a call to safeguard our planet and to comprehend the consequences of our actions on the climate. They remind us that while we marvel at the splendor of the nature, we also bear a responsibility to protect it. Obviously, the art of capturing severe weather phenomena through photography wouldn't exist without the foundation of meteorological modeling, satellite imagery analysis, and radar technology. These elements are the pillars upon which storm photography is built. That's why, with your permission, I'd like to introduce my friend and colleagues as well, one of the most promising students in this field, and also the founder of Severe Weather Alert Sălaj, just to explain our storm chase strategy, Sergiu Pavel.
Thank you and good afternoon. According to what my colleague exposed, we must emphasize the importance of studying weather phenomena, their evolution, and the ways in which we can achieve these complex but very important things. In our modern world, it is essential to recognize the profound influence that weather has on artistic expression and the importance of studying this phenomena. Weather, with its ever-changing patterns and breathtaking displays, has been a source of inspiration for artists across various disciplines. One of the most significant advancements in recent times have been the utilization of satellite images and maps to study and depict weather phenomena. By studying these images, artists can not only gain a deeper appreciation for the beauty of nature, but also incorporate these elements into their creative endeavors. maps to play a crucial role in the transposition of weather phenomena in art. They provide a visual representation of geographical features, climate zones, and atmospheric conditions, allowing artists to explore the spatial relationship between weather and the environment. We find the defining elements of the weather evolution mainly by analyzing the synoptic context, in this way visualizing the movement of air masses that have associated different types of weather and the areas where they act. Additionally, it is important to analyze the mesoscale context with a gradual transition to local conditions and implicitly the analysis at a smaller scale for the area of interest. Visualizing these features of particular importance, we try to build a puzzle as clear as possible, which aims to highlight the evolution of the weather and possible phenomena. Since meteorology and weather represent our common goal, through the raw meteor contest, we have achieved a close collaboration with the National Meteorological Administration. And this collaboration aims to strengthen relations between a very important state institution and meteorology and severe phenomena enthusiasts or private associations that have this goal. Our joy is huge as we have established a close relationship and we are strongly supported by the meteorologists and the officials within the NMA. Moving on to the element that brought us closest to this collaboration, we highlight the raw meteor contest. Raw meteor is a photo contest that aims to capture phenomena of a convective nature and transpose them into photography and especially art. It is established by us, Photograph Haicui, Furtun România, Severe Weather Alert Sălaj, Meteo Nord-Est, and as the main supporter we find the National Meteorological Administration. At this moment, we are preparing the support of the second edition, as the first edition had already taken place on March 25th on this year, and there we enjoyed unique experiences, great photos, and a fair race within it. If you talk about the public and the increasing desire to capture this weather phenomena, we realize that the importance of the impact on the public is great. That's why we are glad that through our various appearances in the media, they fulfill this part by exposing the hobbyist activity. With all that said, we respectfully thank you for your attention, and we hope that we presented some unique concepts to you, that being our main goal. We invite you to join us at the Raw Meteor Art Gallery, where you will be able to find the photos captured by the participants of the first edition of our contest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I hope this opened the eyes that there really we can think out of the box and we can use all means to communicate better. And I hope we all enjoy now a coffee and keep talking about communication with each other, not at each other. Thank you very much.